All right, guys. Welcome once again to the weekly Mac Forum video chat. Hope that you will enjoy this one. Apologize for missing last week. Um, had just a little bit of difficulty. Uh, I wasn't feeling very well to start with, and my Mac certainly wasn't feeling very well. I blew out the power cord uh, the Thursday before, and I ended up ordering a replacement, and it did not come in until sometime on Tuesday afternoon. So we were kind of without the MacBook Pro for uh, uh, for that from about that Thursday until sometime Tuesday evening. So that kind of left us in a little bit of a lurch. As you know, the Google Chat program plugin that we use to run the video chats will run on an iPad. At that point, I hadn't installed it, and I had originally intended to do that, and then I got sick over the weekend, and finally just decided that having a conversation with you guys while coughing and sneezing just was not a real helpful idea. So we decided to call that one a night. Hope you didn't miss too much. In the intervening time, we've got another week of Mac information coming your way. Let's kick things off, first of all, by telling you, currently, I checked about 10 minutes before the show, we have over 278,000 threads, more than 1.5 million posts at the moment, and 280,243 new members, and the newest one is Ron M67. So welcome not only to Ron M67, but to all of our new members who have joined since the last video chat. Hopefully you're enjoying your time in the forum and finding a lot of useful information. If you've been a long-time lurker and you're just now joining, that's great. I encourage you to join. We've had, in the last couple of weeks, a number of people post questions by posting to the Contact Us thread as a means of asking a question. And that's not, I won't say that's a bad idea, because anywhere you can ask a question is okay. But there's a problem with posting questions that way. The reason that we encourage you to join to ask a question is this. In the Contact Us forum, a relatively small number of people see that particular thread. If I remember correctly, it's open to forum moderators and administrators. So you're talking about a relatively small number of people who are going to see your post and perhaps have an answer to your question. Whereas if you become a member and start a thread in the appropriate forum, then any one of our members who may log in over the course of the next several days may see the question and realize that they know the answer and post it for you. We've certainly had situations where new members or someone who had been lurking for a significant period of time who finally decides to join will know the answer to a question either at the same time or before some of our long-standing members have. We have some folks that, although they've been lurking for a number of time, long amount of time, have been they've been using Macs for quite a while. We also have a significant number of Windows users who are making the switch over from Windows. And so um, sometimes the question really isn't a Mac question per se. It's more of a general issue. I'm at this point. How do I do this? This is the technology that I have available, such as moving files from Windows to Mac. Sometimes someone who has just recently moved over from Windows will have a suggestion because they just went through that circumstance and they saw the positives and negatives of what they did, the way they did it, and would say, well, if I had to do it again, I would do it this way, or don't do this, it doesn't work. So I do encourage you to join, take part in the forum, ask the questions that you need to ask. Most of our membership is more than happy to assist with any questions that they might know the answer to. Don't feel too unnerved if a couple of hours go by without a response. Sometimes you'll get a thread that has a large number of views and no responses. Keep in mind that is sometimes the result of forum bots trolling and looking for information. So it doesn't mean that all of those views are real-life human beings who might potentially know the answer to your question. We also, because we have members from around the world, sometimes there's a little bit of a time lag. Our Australian members, for example, tend to be on at different times with a little bit of overlap, but at different times from most of our American contingents. So sometimes it'll be one of the Australian members that knows the answer to your question, and it could be that they just haven't come online when you post back a second time asking your question. All right, that's going to take care of all the housekeeping chores there. Now we can get down to the to a bit more interesting things, a few more interesting things. The public beta of second public beta of Yosemite came out a little over a week ago now, if I remember correctly. That one, I've been running it as part of the public beta. So far, it's been pretty stable for me. I saw this week. In fact, I was looking at it earlier today. Cult of Mac has some information about what the most recent developer release has. Some interface changes in Yosemite that were part of the most recent developer release. The developer release is at a different number right now than the public beta. And a couple of things that were there, that just mostly what they were commenting on was interface cleanup kind of issues, making the dark mode, the behavior and look of dark mode a little more consistent, and also what used to be the software update link in the Apple menu now says App Store. We'll see whether those changes make it into the final release. My suspicion is that they will, partly because you always want to strive for a certain level of consistency, and partly because the transition to the App Store now is pretty much the way Apple is handling downloading not only of the primary release of an OS, but subsequent updates. When you get a message saying that an update is available, it's coming through the App Store, so it makes sense that that link would say now App Store rather than software update. We still occasionally get questions or comments in the forum from people asking about how they go about making the transition from say, Snow Leopard um, to Maverick or to Yosemite. Keep in mind that's going to be partly dependent on your hardware, also dependent on the programs you need to run. If you are still running some PowerPC software, you won't be able to run that on any of the 10.7, 10.8, 10.9. You're going to have to, if you want to run that software, upgrade it or stick with Snow Leopard with 10.6.8. So keep that in mind as you go about doing things. Another thing that came up on Cult of Mac this week, I was looking at a little bit earlier, is they were discussing the large number of celebrity pictures that appeared online, and the suggestion that a lot of these pictures came from various iCloud accounts, and talking about the security of iCloud. You know, there's been a lot of comment about that recently. Some of it useful, some of it not. You know, Apple, to a great extent, remains fairly closed-lipped about security issues. Sometimes by the time you found out about a security leak, they have already patched it. This week, Cult of Mac took a pretty good look at some things relative to the security of iCloud accounts. And some of their suggestions, first of all, turning on two-factor authentication for your Apple ID account, just to give you a little bit extra protection against simple password thefts. Yes, it does require you to enter a code that's sent to your iPhone or iPad, and it confirms that, yes, it is totally you trying to log in. Those are the kinds of things, that's one of the things. Now, two-factor authentication, this two-step authentication method, is not foolproof, okay? This won't keep things 100% from being snatched off of iCloud, but it does make it a little more difficult for the potential hacker. And also, you know, there have been concerns about security, internet security, particularly cloud-based security, for a while. This is not the first cloud-based service. I think that's had issues. I think it made the news in part because it is Apple. The Cult of Mac people point out a couple of things that they still would like to see Apple do to improve it even more. Because the number of these kinds of attacks, not just on iCloud, but across the board, the number of these types of attacks seem to be increasing. And they mentioned a couple of things that they think Apple could do. One of them is a notification anytime, an notification email anytime your iPhone backup has been downloaded by a computer. For those of you that back up your iPhone to the cloud, a notification anytime that backup was accessed. That would at least let you know that someone has gotten access to it. Some Mac users have chosen not to back up their phones to the cloud. Now, what does that mean? Well, at its most basic level, that means that if something were to go wrong with your phone, you wouldn't be able to restore from a backup until you got home to your computer. Okay? So in other words, it reduces the convenience of being able to restore at any time, but it also means that someone's not going to get the contents of your phone backup by accessing your iCloud account. Create good complex passwords. Look, I'm not one of these people to say that if you get hacked, it's because you didn't pick a good enough password. That's not my way of thinking. But do try to pick complex passwords. If necessary, use one of the good password management apps that are available to help you both in terms of selecting a creating a secure password and remembering them all. And those were some of the things that the Cult of Mac folks posted, and I kind of liked them because of the way they summarized it. It's not a, if you're new to the Mac, this is a good read because it doesn't bog down in a lot of techno jargon. And even if you're not new to the Mac, it gives you a good overview of what happened from what seems to have happened from the iCloud side, and it's a good starting point to look at security. We've had a number of discussions in the forum this week on various aspects of security, and that seems to come around periodically. So that was one of the things that caught my attention from Cult of Mac this week. The other was a little bit of discussion about some of the things that might be announced at the upcoming Apple event this week. And you know, it's always, I'll tell you, speculating about what's going to come up at an Apple event is virtually useless as a practical matter, but it can be a little bit fun now and then. They looked at the speculation from one analyst and looked at some of the things that they were expecting. Of course, almost everyone is expecting an iPhone 6 with some type of slightly larger screen, somewhere in the order of 4.7 and 5.5 inches. And that both of these will have a 128 gigabyte storage option. I hate to think what that 128 gigabyte model will cost if it ever materializes. You know, if any of my friends, relatives, etc. are listening and you want to buy me one of those for my birthday soon, well, hey, I won't turn it down, but I'm not expecting that anytime soon. There were some predictions relative to the iWatch. I'll believe those when I see them. It's not that I don't think an iWatch is coming. It's just that the proposed specifications are all over the place. Do I believe that there is going to be something similar to what a lot of people have called an iWatch? Yes, because that fits the biometrics that have been suggested of being able to track pulse rate and blood pressure and some of these other things that have been suggested in some of the discussions fit along with some of the other things that Apple previewed during the recent keynote address at Worldwide Developer Conference earlier this summer. But the specifics of the iWatch are not that big an issue for me. Would I rush right out and buy one? Probably not. I rarely wear a regular watch anymore because I keep banging them on doorways and things like that and breaking the watch. So I probably personally am not going to rush right out and buy one. Some people will. If you do, more power to you. I hope you'll love it. A couple of other things that they suggested might be there. A specification upgrade for the iPad Air 2 to include an A8 processor, an anti-reflective screen, and possibly the gold color option to match the iPhone. That option was really popular there for a while. I Out of those specs, the A8 processor is interesting to me because my personal belief when I'm buying new technology is always buy the most that you can afford in terms of processing power and memory. But the thing that might sway me one way or the other is if they have really improved the anti-glare screen. I can think of some situations where I use my iPad in where having a little bit better anti-glare would be a good option. But that's it. It's not one of those things I'm going to rush out and stand in line at the Apple Store for, especially considering that the nearest Apple Store is a significant drive for me. So not going to be rushing out to the Apple Store, not because the hardware is bad, but because really I'm not seeing huge numbers of things that for me are a must-have feature. The one that's hanging me up right now is that I won't be able to make complete use of some of the new features in Yosemite because my iPhone 4 will not run iOS 8. So there's going to be some features that I'll be able to use on my iPad, on the iPad Air, but I won't be able to use those on my phone. Is that going to be enough to make me rush out and get a new iPhone? Probably not. Just for budget reasons. Would I like to have either a 5 or a 6? Sure, but sometimes the budget doesn't permit you to do that. And that discussion started me to thinking, what would I like to? One of the other things, by the way, before I forget about those predictions, before I move on from that, one of the predictions that I have seen, and Cult of Mac mentions it, is that the power button on the iPhone might be moved to the side of the device. And that it might be programmable so that it could be integrated with specific applications. I'll wait and see on that. I wouldn't mind if it were programmable, but unless it did something really neat, that's not a make or break issue for me. Any of that. Right now, I don't know what they could do as a make or break issue if I had to decide between the 5 and the 6. I don't know what they could include as I must go out and buy a 6. Not that there's anything wrong with the 6, it's just very seldom when new gear comes out am I in a situation where I have to have, where I couldn't take the one that's most immediately released. Usually when I shift gear, it's because the gear I'm using is a couple of generations back. Okay? I'm still running a MacBook Pro that's on a Core 2 Duo processor. It does what I need it to do. I did have a small panic attack last week when the power went down and was relieved to discover that it was the power cord and not the entire device. Would a new Mac be nice? Sure. But I could also keep the current one running for a while longer, barring unforeseen problems. So those are the kinds of things that have caught my attention as far as what may come out of Cupertino this week. As I say, there's nothing. Not that it's going to be boring. It's just there's not going to be a whole lot that I personally will rush right out and must grab. Now, next week, when we know what's being announced, I may have changed my mind. But for me and for my budget, I'm going to wait a little while. I'm certainly going to wait till the feeding frenzy is over. I mean, I know Cupertino would prefer that I do things otherwise, but hey, sometimes you got to do what works for you. I do expect some of the things to be interesting, but I'm not planning on rushing right out and doing and killing myself to get a hold of any of the devices that are going to be announced. I will be checking to see what is announced and following that up. One of the other things I wanted to mention before we move on, and this is probably going to be a kind of short show tonight. I have some other things I have to wrap up here on my end, but one of the things I wanted to be sure and mention to you, we talked a little bit about some of the issues with iCloud security and those kinds of things. Do stay up on that, but also the thing that was most that's most interesting to me right now is still catching my attention is how much you can still get done on older machines, and we have a number of members who are still running older machines, and other than the fact that some of the internet stuff will not run on older machines now, and there are some versions of the OS that are no longer being updated. If you're on 10.4, for example, 10.5, those kinds of things have not been updated in a while, security-wise. So do be aware of that. If you have security questions, ask them. I do want to mention one thing, because it pops up in the forum periodically, mostly from Windows users who are coming over to the Mac. And this is true even if you are on a Windows computer. Just because your computer is behaving badly does not necessarily mean that it has been infested with a virus. Okay? And I will say that even on Windows. Okay? Numerous times I've had PC using friends ask me to look at their machines because they think they have a virus, even on the Windows side. And when you look at it, it's either a situation where a bunch of malware has been installed, either accidentally as part of some other installation. That's usually the cause. Some of that malware is hard to get rid of, so I can see why people would think that it's a virus. Generally speaking, the distinction that is made among Windows security, most Windows security people, by most Mac users who kind of follow this, is malware includes a number of things, Trojans and a bunch of other things. Some of these ad pop-up things that keep going, the Java exploits, the Flash exploits, and viruses. A virus is generally reserved for things that are, the term virus is generally reserved for things that are self-replicating. In other words, once it gets on your system, it passes on without any intervention from you. I realize it's at some level a nitpicky distinction to make, but it also can be an important feature in trying to figure out what you have and how to get rid of it. So do keep that in mind. Your best bet is to be aware of what's being installed on your system. And if you are not sure where something came from, don't install it until you know where it came from. I would say that for any computer platform, Mac, PC, whatever, you are your best first line of defense there. Um, and I want to mention something about Gatekeeper, for example. There's a security feature built into the most recent incarnations of the OS where when you try to install something, depending on how you have your security and privacy settings set up, it may tell you that you can't install. Okay, now you have two options for resolving this issue if you are sure that it's something you want to install. You know, for example, you know that it's coming from a legit developer and you want to install it. The first one would be to go into the security and privacy preference pane, go to the General tab, and unlock it. Enter your password to unlock it. And you have three options there. Is to, one, only allow downloads from the Mac App Store. Two, allow downloads from the Mac App Store and identified developers. Or three, allow downloads from anywhere. And I'm looking at mine now, and I realize that it's set to anywhere. I'm changing that right now because I don't normally keep it there. I installed something recently that I had to shift to anywhere and forgot to put it back. I typically keep mine either at Mac App Store or at Mac App Store and identified developers. Now, so you've encountered one thing with this setup. If you change it for some reason, and there are legitimate reasons you would need to, like installing a piece of software that you know is safe. When you change it, you have to remember to go and put it back to whatever your previous setting was. Well, there's another way to do it. If you right-click on the installer for the program that you're going to install, before you start running the installer, if you right-click and look at the contextual menu, you can temporarily reset Gatekeeper to anywhere and then install that piece of software, and when the installation is done, it goes back to the other level of security, back up to Mac App Store. So that's one workaround in case you're afraid that you're not going to remember to adjust that, readjust that setting. I didn't realize that mine was set there. It hasn't been a big issue because I haven't installed anything new recently, and this is my Maverick install that I'm running on at the moment, and for most of the last several weeks I've been running on the Yosemite install, so anything that I've installed in the last couple of days would have been on that Yosemite install. So, but that's one thing you want to be aware of. We've had a discussion in the forum this week about the Macintosh firewall, whether you should or should not have it on or off, you know, whatever. By default, it is off. Once again, it's in the security and privacy settings. If you click on the firewall tab, you have some options. One of them involves turning it on, and then there's also some configuration options available. Now, I followed the thread about the firewall, and I tend to be in the camp of most of the thread. Mine happens to be off at the moment, but it's because 99.9% of the time I am behind a router at home and I have a firewall on the router. If I were accessing Wi-Fi at a public place, something of that nature, going to a coffee house or public library, somewhere like that, and accessing a public Wi-Fi situation, I certainly would think about having it on. And some people have it on even at home. It's probably not going to hurt anything to have it on. You will occasionally get a message that may surprise you, but it can be very instructive. Certainly something to keep in mind if you are concerned about your security settings. And that's going to really do it for me in talking about security on the Mac for this evening. One of the, now probably sometime in the near future, we may want to do a whole chat segment about security, but those tend to degenerate into various excuse me, issues with viruses and the like, and to be honest with you, those discussions frequently go off the rails a bit and end up giving me a headache. That's why, for the most part, I've stayed out of them. But that's going to just about do it for this week's tips. Had those things for you. I'll try to post the links to the Cult of Mac readings. I'll let you know about those, where they can be found. If you are a Macworld subscriber to the Macworld Digital Edition, their most recent issue has quite a bit of information about Yosemite. Everyone is pretty much expecting it to hit sometime in mid to late October, so I encourage you to check that out. I haven't had a chance to check it out yet, but in the past, when new versions of the operating system have come out, they've had good information there, so keep an eye out for that. I haven't read that digital issue. It's in the backlog of stuff that I need to look at. But that's going to just about do it for me this week. I'm going to go and recuperate now. It was a very bad football day for me. Both the Saints and the Cowboys lost. So we won't be discussing the opening weekend of the NFL beyond that. You know, maybe the Giants and Lions game tomorrow will be interesting, but today was certainly a bust as far as football is concerned, and my apologies to our European crew. I know you guys call soccer football, but my brain just doesn't seem to work that way, and for some reason, soccer just has not caught my attention. Nothing wrong with it. It certainly takes a lot of skill, but it just hasn't caught my attention. Anyway, I'm going to go now and probably take a couple of aspirin and recover from this this weekend's football, and I will see you guys next week on the Mac Forum video chat.